on mapping financial and technical assistance for industry decarbonization in emerging markets and developing economies. As the Climate Club Interim Secretariat, we are welcoming you all for today's meeting. This is a recorded session, just to remind you on that. But it's a technical meeting, and we welcome all feedback, inputs on this Climate Club forthcoming report that looks into the mapping of the financial and technical assistance for industry decarbonization in emerging markets and developing economies. We have, as the Climate Club Interim Secretariat, shared a draft of this report on 10th of June. And the Climate Club members have already had looked into an earlier draft at the first body of members meeting on the 23rd of April. The report is open for comments until the 3rd of July, with the aim to finalize by September at the second body of members meeting. A few words on the content of this report. It is the first ever done mapping of technical and financial assistance for industry decarbonization. It covers two types of analysis. It's a retrospective analysis of what happened in the past 2 decades for the steel, cement, and petrochemical industries in emerging markets and developing economies. And it also shows what's on the offer today. So if emerging markets and developing economies for their industry decarbonization projects want to receive assistance, it also displays that. The report explores public sources. It also explores private sources and also philanthropies of what type of assistance is available. And the conclusions are very interesting because it shows the needs and the gaps to scale up also assistance for industry decarbonization. So the objective of today's meeting is to collect your insights, your feedback, suggestions to this work, and also to understand from Climate Club members their views on how to scale up assistance. This meeting brings together the member governments. Also, it brings together those actors of the donor community from IFIs, from philanthropies, as well as from institutional investors. The report will be a standalone work of the Climate Club, and it will also provide inputs to the global matchmaking platform, which we will later hear an update on this from the UNIDO team, who's the secretariat of the global matchmaking platform. So I welcome you all again to this technical meeting. Very much looking forward to your feedback, to your comments, and I hand over to the co-chairs now for their opening remarks. First to Chile, my colleague Sebastian, who's online, will deliver the opening remarks on behalf. And then it will be followed by Philip Behrens from the BMW Kasai, Germany. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dega, for the introduction, and I greet everyone here participating, all the representatives for the international finance institutions, for philanthropies, institutional investors, and so on, as well as members, of course, of the Climate Club, the countries, co-chairs, Germany, and as well, of course, as the interim secretariat of the Climate Club and the OECD working team in the mapping report. Of course, like Chile is part of the emerging economies, and emerging and developing economies will play a leading role in successful climate action and in decarbonization of the industry in the future. The Climate Club is an inclusive intergovernmental forum and aims at, among others, enhancing multi and bilateral cooperation between members, demonstrating solidarity. Pillar 3 of the Climate Club aims exactly at this, boosting international climate cooperation and partnership to improve the enabling environmental for industry decarbonization in emerging economies and developing countries, with a special focus on leverage public finance and necessary complementary technical assistance, and facilitating the mobilization and private finance for industry decarbonization. The centerpiece of this year's work under the Pillar 3 is the development of the Global Matchmaking Platform, or GMP, which aims to accelerate and coordinate international support efforts for emerging markets and developing economies, or EMDEs. The GMP is currently under development, supported by the secretariat provided by UNIDO. Special thanks to them for this and for providing an update of the GMP later on today's session. We know that improved financial and technical assistance is needed to help to ensure the development and deployment of key technologies and infrastructure, especially in the EMDs, where the biggest industrial growth in the next decade is expected to happen. We also see that a growing number of international funding organizations, funds, and philanthropies are developing programs and projects towards industry decarbonization, including technical assistance, of course. Yet currently available support is insufficient. We will be working together with key stakeholders, such as public and private providers of funding, gathered here today, governments as well as private sector, to tackle this endeavor. Today's discussion of a draft report mapping financial and technical assistance for industry decarbonization in emerging markets and developing economies, developed by the OECD team, will be crucial for this continued joint work. The mapping report provides an overview of the current financial and technical assistance landscape and constitutes the first ever mapping of financial and technical assistance to industry decarbonization in EMDs, undertaken by the Climate Club. Today, we would like to receive your feedback in the findings of the mapping report and jointly discussing the financial gaps where more effective and efficient use of the public finance and technical assistance is needed. Today's exchange will feed into the further refinement of the report, inform the further development of the GMP, and inform the discussion among the Climate Club members and how to boost international climate cooperation and partnership to accelerate industrial decarbonization, as well as preparation for climate work program for 2025 and 2026. We would like to thank everyone attending the segue to opening by Germany. And I give the floor now to my colleague Philipp Behrens from the German side, co-chairs. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you very much. Thanks a lot, Sebastian. Thanks a lot, Dea. I hope that you can understand me and hear me. Yes, a warm welcome from my side as well on behalf of the German government. Let me start by saying that we are very, very proud that we can serve as a co-chair of the Climate Club side by side with our colleagues from Chile, but also with the colleagues from the many other Climate Club members, highly engaged in our common initiative. Also, we are extremely happy to have gathered such a great team of important institutions with OECD and IEA as the interim secretariat of the Climate Club and UNIDO as the secretariat of the Global Matchmaking Platform. Thanks to all of you, we have come very, very far so far. The industrial sector is a significant contributor to the global economy. But at the same time, it is also a major source of GHG emissions. And the full decarbonization of industry is therefore crucial to keep global warming in the range that we agreed upon in the Paris Agreement. And Germany is committed to accelerating the decarbonization of industry. And this is one of the highest priority of my government. What we want to do is we want to keep up the economic strength and the success of the German industry, but at the same time want to enable it to transform to a net zero pathway. But to keep in line with the Paris Agreement, efforts in all countries are needed. And the Climate Club was created to increase collective action to accelerate the necessary transformation. One of our challenges is to move from incremental This very important report that we are talking about today will provide crucial insights for the global matchmaking platform by not only demonstrating the finance gaps and needs, but also by mapping existing financial flows, actors, and programs on industry decarbonization. I think that the different modules of Pillar 3 of the Climate Club, the mapping that we are presenting today, the case studies on innovative financing instruments, and the GMP are going to complement and build on each other perfectly. The concept of the GMP is to matchmake government requests with the available offer of technical and financial assistance to align industry with the 1.5 degrees target.
Philip, I believe you're muted.
Philip, we don't hear you, unfortunately.
You cannot hear me?
Now we can.
No, we can hear you.
No. So you lost me somewhere in the beginning?
20
20
seconds ago.
Half a minute.
I'm very sorry. Actually, we are very much struggling with WebEx at the moment, although we are very much supposed to use WebEx all the time. Okay, let me just maybe some more words on the GMP, and I hope that you can understand me now. So the idea of the GMP is not to set up a completely new support infrastructure, but to make use of the strength of international partnership. And we want to use existing and potentially new instruments to deploy resources at speed and scale. And this is why the success of the GMP will depend on the establishment of a strong and reliable support network that includes donor countries, IFIs, philanthropies, and many other international and also national institutions. And hopefully many of you who are with us in this discussion today. One crucial milestone towards decarbonization is the next NDC cycle. Before COP30 in 2025, all parties of the Paris Agreement need to submit new NDCs with concrete targets. And as the investment cycles of industry usually cover several decades, this round of NDCs might be the last one, our last chance, to shift gears for net zero by mid-century. And these NDCs should include ambitious and robust sections on industry too. Actions required for industrial decarbonization should be defined in there. But for the development and implementation of these new NDCs, especially developing countries and emerging economies will need to receive support. And we intend to offer this support to the members of the Climate Club. And this should be coordinated via the Global Matchmaking Platform. Let me stop by thanking the Climate Club Interim Secretariat and also UNIDO for collaborating in this organization of our technical meeting today. I thank you all very much. I'm looking forward to our discussion. And sorry again for the connection.
Thank you very much, Sebastian and Philip, for your introductory remarks. Now I hand over to Cecile from the OECD side of the Climate Club Interim Secretariat to present on the findings of the report. But just before that, very briefly, 3 simple housekeeping rules. We would appreciate If you could please rename yourselves as organization and your name, surname, and some of you have already done that. Thank you for that. As I mentioned at the very beginning, this is a recorded session, but it's an open session because it's a technical meeting. So any feedback, comment are welcomed. And we kindly ask you to keep yourself muted and use the raise hand button of the WebEx to indicate an intervention. Thank you very much. And over to you, Cecilia.
Thank you very much, and good morning, good afternoon. Thank you for the introduction, and a warm welcome to all participants from my side too. So we are very pleased to share with you the finding of this report on the mapping of financial and technical assistance for industry decarbonization in EMDEs. As it has been said, but let me quickly remind that this module 1 is indeed part of the pillar 3 on boosting international cooperation and partnerships. And this module indeed complements the other module of the pillar, so namely module 2 on successful financing instruments and enabling condition to mobilize private capital, and module 3 on the development of the GMP, which we will hear about later in this meeting. And so it is in that spirit of boosting international cooperation and partnership that we hope indeed through this meeting to hear from your insights on the findings of the report, and to provide also the opportunity to facilitate the discussion between the different group of stakeholders which are represented today, including government from Climate Club members, international financial institutions, funds, philanthropies, and also institutional investors initiative. So next slide. So what is at stake when it comes to financing industry decarbonization? First, it's a matter of scale, with global investment in low carbon technologies for industry decarbonization, which need to increase by a factor 3 to 5 by 2030 to be aligned with the net zero pathway. And these investments will require various sources of financing: public, private, domestic, international. And for EMDEs, the challenge is even more pronounced as manufacturing industry capacity is growing and is expected to continue growing for economic development, and at the same time should decarbonize. And so identifying where the financing needs and gaps are is crucial to ensure that the investments, the financial and technical assistance are designed and channeled in a way which can indeed contribute to effective industry decarbonization in this country, and including through international cooperation. And so this directly links to the mapping. And why the mapping? With this mapping, we aim to identify key trends on the state of play of the financial and technical assistance for industry decarbonization in EMDs. So what about the scale of the financing and technical assistance that has been provided so far? What type of support? What type of financing instrument used? What type of projects have been targeted? And this is to inform areas for action, and including to inform the GMP, as we said, on which programs and funds could support industry decarbonization for EMDs. And I would also like to emphasize that it's about drawing trends and key insights to inform these areas for action for cooperation, but it's not about tracking progress towards climate finance objective. And this is something which is indeed tracked at a broader level in other instances. So just to highlight this. So what does the mapping cover? First, in terms of sector, the mapping focuses on 3 industry subsectors: the steel, cement, chemicals, which represent together 70% of global industry CO2 emissions. The mapping covers specific types of sources of financial and technical assistance towards EMDs. First, public sources, so bilateral and multilateral sources towards EMDs, which was the initial scope of the mapping. And then we expanded to other sources beyond the public sector to gain further insights on the private finance mobilized and insights related to institutional investors and philanthropies. And for each one of these building blocks, we looked at to what extent these sources of financial and technical assistance cover or have targeted the steel, cement, and chemical sector. And precisely because of this targeted focus on these 3 specific industry subsectors, this, as has been said, constitutes a unique mapping for industry decarbonization, specifically focusing on financing sources for these 3 sectors. So why the mapping? What does it cover? Now a few words about the how and how the mapping was built. So we used a wide range of data and information depending on the type of financial and technical assistance we were looking at. In some cases, we could use very detailed information. So typical example is the OECD data from the Development Assistance Committee and Creditor Reporting System that we call DAC-CRS, which includes over 8,000 project-level transactions a year. And in other cases, we had to conduct very bottom analysis and research from individual websites, project database, annual report. And this was completed by some interviews. I take also the opportunity to thank the stakeholders who have participated to this interview to share their insights. But in any case, I think what is important also to say that these differences in terms of sources are actually the result of data availability. And it's something I come back in a few seconds. And before digging into the findings that are specific to each one of the building block of the mapping, here are 6 insights that we draw across different categories. So meaning whether it's from public, bilateral, multilateral, or private finance mobilized, for instance, because there are commonalities. So first, it's about data. Available data on financial and technical assistance for industry decarbonization in EMDs is scarce and is scattered. Second, financial and technical assistance, specifically for industry decarbonization in EMDs, have been overlooked so far. We saw very little support that has been received. Third insight, when we look at what is provided, there is room to tap into a wider range of providers, to target more recipient countries, to use more different types of financing instruments. And there is also room to target implementation projects and projects implying deep emission reductions. That's the fourth key finding. We saw various funds and programs which can cover industry decarbonization for EMDs, but they are not necessarily targeted towards industry. Most of them are transverse funds or cover many sectors. And 6, the good news is that there is a growing interest in developing such funds and programs for industry decarbonization. It is a nascent space, and so it means that there is an opportunity here in terms of international collaboration and partnerships to learn from these findings and from the state of play in order to design or channel financial and technical assistance which could foster industry decarbonization in this country. So moving specifically on the data challenge first, as just said, so data on financial and technical assistance for industry decarbonization is scarce. And it is scattered because there is no single source of data which captures the full scope of the mapping that we envision. And even for specific type of support, for instance, public or private philanthropy, there is not a single source of data. Beyond data availability, so which is a key challenge, it's also a matter of granularity. Data on the financial and technical assistance for the industry sector in general is limited. And even more when we try to look at subsector level, so about steel, cement, chemicals. In addition, there are also differences of scope and methodology across data and across existing analysis or report, which prevent us from doing any direct comparison across the results. So there are also challenge in terms of methodology and scope. And finally, last point, also challenge regarding data transparency and confidentiality, especially when it comes, for instance, for private finance mobilized or private finance, which constitute indeed further challenge to try to establish a comprehensive mapping. So if we move now to the first building block of the mapping about the public bilateral and multilateral support. So that's something that has been presented indeed during the first body of member meeting. And for that, we used the very detailed data from the OECD DAC-CRS database, and which shows that the steel, cement, and chemical sector received very limited support for decarbonization purposes. So to give an order of magnitude, these 3 subsectors together received around $1 billion from mitigation-related development finance in total in 20 years. And beyond this amount itself, I would say that most importantly is to put into perspective what these represent. and it is much less than 1% of the total mitigation-related development finance, which has been provided to all sectors, so beyond industry, and over this 20-year period. So these three subsectors, steel, cement, chemicals, indeed have been overlooked. However, they, as we said, they represent 70% of global industry CO2 emissions. And if we look now at the characteristics of the financial flows that have been provided so far, so not looking at the amount, but the characteristic of the flow, actually they are characterized by a very limited pool of providers, recipients, and financial instruments. It means, so for instance, almost all support come from multilateral providers. We have one provider who represented 80% of the total amount. Again, 80% of the total amount was targeted only to 2 countries. Type of instrument was predominantly 80% by debt instrument. So it means that there are opportunities for this subsector to potentially benefit from dozens of providers that have been recorded for other sectors, for instance, beyond industry, as well as to benefit from a variety of instruments, and target also other country, other region in which these sectors are growing. And finally, and equally important, what we see is also that recipient projects have focused on incremental emission reduction, so basically focusing on energy efficiency or waste management, circularity, but it was not focusing on disruptive approaches to deeply decarbonize, to be aligned with net zero pathway. And beyond the subsectors themselves, so steel, cement, chemicals, we also looked at 2 cross-cutting technologies. So we look at, from the different perspective of this project and data set, 2 cross-cutting technology which are key enablers for decarbonizing the steel, cement, chemicals, so clean hydrogen and carbon capture, utilization and storage, CCUS, for which it is acknowledged indeed that technology transfer will be crucial for EMDs too. And however, what we see again is that the flows directed to these 2 cross-cutting technologies have been equally limited. We are talking about 150 million USD over the past 20 years again, with a very little diversification in terms of providers, financial instruments, and also again not being driven towards really implementation projects. Moving from the public support, so now moving towards the private sources of financing, we looked at the private finance mobilized from official development finance intervention in EMDs, again for this 3 sectors, and still building on OECD data from the DAC CRS database. But here, granular data is available from different periods, so here it's about from 2012 to 2020. Actually, what we see is that public bilateral and multilateral support has indeed triggered private finance mobilization for the decarbonization of these 3 sectors. And it's about 1 billion USD, which has been mobilized between 2012 and 2020 for these purposes. But again, beyond the amount, if we put this amount into perspective, this represents less than 1% of the total mitigation related private finance mobilized on the same period for all sectors, so again beyond industry. So again, these 3 sectors represented a very small share of the total private finance mobilized from a broader perspective. Same idea, if we look at the characteristics of the support from private finance mobilization, we equally see that there is further room to tap into a wider range of provider and recipient country. We have almost all support coming from multilateral providers, with 3 providers representing, again, 80% of the total amount mobilized. Different conclusion in terms of instrument, because here for private finance mobilized, we saw different types of instruments that have been used, so syndicated loans, direct investment in companies and SPV, co-financing and work guarantee. So a little bit more diversification in terms of instrument compared to the public's finding that we discussed just before. And again, in terms of recipient country, we can see they are diverse country, a mix of recipient country, but actually these are not targeting major manufacturing country related to this sector. So there is also room to target more countries, in the sense that more countries that experience growth with respect to these three sectors and which need to decarbonize. So we now look at what are the existing channels of funds and the IFIs program which could cover industry decarbonization in EMD. So previous chapter was more related to what has been provided so far. Now we look at what exists and what could support industry decarbonization project in EMDs. And for that, we used another database from NDC Partnerships, so Climate Funds Explorer, which gather funds targeting climate change mitigation, adaptation, or resilience objective. And we analyze each fund reported in this database to see to what extent they cover or not the industry sector. And actually, what we see that various funds could support indeed decarbonization, industry decarbonization in general. We identified 20 of them. But if we look at more precisely, these funds do not cover the industry sector in the same way. So we have nearly half of these funds that are fully transverse, namely they are not sectoral specific. So for instance, these funds are associated to purpose of supporting climate goals in general or sustainable development. So industry decarbonization project could fit into these funds, but the scope coverage of these funds is by nature significantly wider. We found also another third of these funds which consider the industry sector, but from a wider perspective. For instance, in that case, the industry sector is closely linked to the objective or to the wider categories which apply to the funds, such as innovative technologies, infrastructure, energy efficiency, but it's not fully dedicated to industry. And we have finally nearly 20% of these funds which closely consider the industry sector. In the sense that we have industry specifically mentioned as one of the few targeted sector. So it means that what we saw is that the funds targeting really industry is not common. And this could constitute actually a barrier, especially when we consider funds which cover various sectors or which are fully transverse, because in that case, it means that industry-related projects may have to compete with projects of a very different nature, whether on energy transport or land use, to access this fund. And given we know the specific challenges of financing industry decarbonization project, in particular for this high capital and emission intensive subsector, it means that the business case for such project could be of disadvantage comparing to those of other sectors. So here really key message is about saying that there are various funds existing, but not necessarily targeting the industry sector. And then we looked at in more detail at a sample of IFIs program, so 17 IFR program, to see again to what extent they cover industry decarbonization project, and notably based on the available project database that are specific to the IFIs. And from this sample of IFIs, we saw that indeed almost all of them cover the industry sector in their portfolio, and more than half of them have decarbonization related projects in their portfolio. Others are more supporting industry capacity growth, for instance, but half of them focus on decarbonization project. But near zero emission aligned project, meaning really focusing on deep decarbonization of the sector through breakthrough technology, it's something that we see as new and emerging. But yes, it's emerging in a few IFIs programs. So it's emerging, and it has been also confirmed by further interview, which just mentioned right after. So actually, what I mentioned in this growing interest in developing specific funds and programs for industry decarbonization in EMDs has been confirmed indeed by the interview that we have conducted with some IFIs and funds to discuss their portfolio and also to provide additional insight on how they approach industry decarbonization. And here are some key findings of this interview, mostly focusing on financing instrument aspects. So what we heard is that there is a mix of instruments used depending on the project specificities, but we saw that concessional loans were indeed reported to be the most widely used type of instrument. De-risking instruments were also mentioned as very valuable tool for industry decarbonization project considered in such project, and specifically through guarantee. And when talking about innovative instruments or relevant instruments for industry decarbonization project, there was blended finance and concessional loans again, which were reported as the most relevant instruments. And finally, when it comes to barriers toward industry decarbonization in EMDs, the lack of project pipeline and market risk appeared as the most critical barriers towards this type of projects. So the last part of the mapping focused on other type of insight from sources and stakeholders beyond the public sector, but which can contribute to industry decarbonization in EMDs again, including institutional investors. So why institutional investors are important in the discussion? Actually, they have the potential to advance sustainable development given their huge asset value. So we are talking about hundreds of trillions in assets in OECD country alone. And which means that, as it has been showed by previous OECD report, that only a few percent of these hundreds of trillions, so less than 4%, would be sufficient actually to fill the financing gap required for the whole sustainable development in general. Also, according to a previous OECD survey, we saw that institutional investors, however, little invest in EMDs as they tend to invest in low-risk market actually. So we try to see to what extent institutional investors consider manufacturing industry such as steel, cement, and chemicals in their portfolio. But here, publicly data or information available is very scarce. So what we conducted is based on a sample of pension funds. So we focus on 28 pension funds, which include both the biggest pension fund in the top 10 and pension funds for which we know that they invest in emerging market and developing economies. And with the publicly available information, we could see that they do have indeed holdings in manufacturing industry such as steel, cement, chemicals, and they do invest via foreign and domestic equities, but information are not sufficient, for instance, to see if there is any direct or indirect link with potential decarbonization considerations. However, what we could highlight and see is that most pension funds that we analyze consider ESG approach, for instance, within their investment practice. And so this could be, be a vehicle to and an increasing role in the investment decision in order to drive alignment of their portfolio with decarbonization efforts and net zero pathway. And this is a trend which can also be seen through institutional-led, investor-led initiatives like the Climate Action 100+, for instance, or Asian Investor Group on climate change, Principle for Responsible Investment. So there is a potential, and yes, initiatives are emerging, but this is something that that need to be further looked. And finally, as the last type of sources, we looked more in detail to philanthropies. Philanthropies as another stream which can contribute also to support, to drive and to raise awareness about industry decarbonization in EMDs. Based on existing analysis, so both from ClimateWorks and the OECD at the global level, this showed that, again, industry sector represent a small share of the climate-related funding from philanthropy, so a few percent. And so this directly echoes to the type of conclusion previously mentioned for public sources and private finance mobilized. So industries is a small share. So again, to gain further insight and more precise insight, we looked in particular to 40 grant opportunities, analyzed these different grants and philanthropies to see if and how they cover industry decarbonization. Again, data availability and granularity makes it difficult to draw generic conclusion on the financial assistance towards industry decarbonization and in EMDs. But in that specific case and sample, we found a total of $48 million since 2020, which has been identified as supporting industry decarbonization. We also saw that, and this also echoes to previous conclusion, that there was not a strong focus on project implementation at the industry level, but it rather also target research, yes, capacity building. I mean, so again, focus on implementation could that could be kind of the same conclusion as the type of project that have benefited from public support. And in terms of geographies, we see from this sample that Asia and the EU received the most amount of grant opportunities. So there's also further room to target various type of countries, and in particular developing countries with high manufacturing capacity growth. So that's for the specific finding of the report. Stop just to recall that in terms of next step and perspective, so Climate Club members can provide written feedback by 3rd of July. As it has been said, the final report will be released at the second Climate Club Bodies of Member meeting in September. So we are very looking forward to hear from your feedback and discussion. And as a conclusion, I mean, what we've seen from these different insights and different key findings is that tracking financial and technical assistance for industry decarbonization towards these emerging EMDs actually would require establish a common framework, a fit-for-purpose framework, where Climate Club could play a leading role. So it's something to be considered, and but we saw that, yes, with the findings and methodology availability, that it's something which could be of use. So I stop here. Thank you very much for your attention, and continue with the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cecile. I think very thorough analysis. So I'm sure there will be a lot of questions. Before maybe having a group discussion, a number of strategic guiding questions, I would like to first open the floor for any questions to the analysis, because we've seen quite a number of numbers, very interesting findings, and maybe I'd like to see today we have members from Climate Club representing us. Where reviewed the findings, such as the leaded, the from here. Okay, sorry, I think there was a problem with the voice. So before we enter the strategic guiding questions, I'd like to open the floor for any questions on what Cecile has presented, because the findings are quite interesting and the analysis is very thorough. So we'd like to open the floor first of all for that. So any questions, please raise your hand, and Cecile will be answering on the findings. I see from the World Bank, Subi, go ahead, please, Subi.
Hi, Jagar, good to see you again. Nice to see you. Couple of things here. Cecile, thank you so much for your presentation. You can't hear me?
Yeah, it's good now, thank you.
Okay. First of all, a great thanks to you for pulling up this information together. I think it's so rich it's very important for us to make a case stronger for the support from the development financial institutions to support the sector, specifically on the industrial decarbonization. I understand that probably this report in the draft stage is out somewhere in public domain, but if you can share the report with the people probably who are connected and once again with everybody, I think it will be helpful so that we can go through the report once to see that if there is anything further that needs to be done, but it looks quite good in terms of the numbers and quite strongly presents that why there should be more investments flowing into the sector. Just a couple of quick observations. I'm not sure that if the World Bank's samples included some of the recent projects in the green hydrogen space. There have been at least two, one in India and one in Chile, and the others are in preparation, but I am assuming that you're looking at the projects which have already gone through the board approval and the funds are available in the countries. So at least two of such projects are there, which could change the number, because in India we provided a $3 billion funding to Government of India. So that itself can swing your numbers to a different level. So that was one, and then Chile also in there provided green hydrogen funding for I think $150 million, if I'm not mistaken. But then there are a few more interventions that are there across the board. The important point which you made was that even though investments have been coming in from the development financing institutions to the sector, but they are not directly linked to the industrial decarbonization. And essentially, the focus has been on energy efficiency. I agree with it. Even in the World Bank so far, we were looking at energy efficiency through guarantee risk instruments, so that more finance, more private sector and commercial financing can be leveraged on it. Beyond that, what at least my observations, and my colleague Abhishek is also connected, I'm sure he would have a couple of more points to add, is that this is essentially private sector driven, right? Public sector generally can facilitate. And when we look at that, segmentization of the financing of the roles, the World Bank is generally, trying to figure out how and in which format can the funds be used so that it could be leveraged, as well as can be, so to say, lighthouse kind of effect can be created from those investments. Because we are very small as compared to the requirements that you yourself mentioned are in multi-billion dollars, right? So how we can leverage our funding so that more commercial investments can come in, demonstration effect can happen. And this is precisely what we are struggling even in green hydrogen space. So within India, we have been going around meeting with a lot of developers, lot of port authorities to see if the green hydrogen hubs need to be developed. I think repeatedly what we are hearing is that there is money available. So the problem generally boils down to either land or availability of evacuation, transmission evacuation infrastructure. And there is again, indirectly it's linked to the right of way issues, which is again linked to, land issues. So there is where, all the discussions ultimately boil up to. So how can the development financing institutes come forward, support the sector so that there is demonstration effect, leveraging effect, lighthouse effect? Probably some of the insights from yourselves and the other colleagues connected here would be helpful for us to even think through that how we can proceed ahead. Then there would be the discussion about how we can tap into the other concessional pots of money that are available. I'll take a pause here. I am checking if my colleague Abhishek is still connected and if he has further points to add to it. Abhishek, are you still there?
Yes, Surbi, thank you so much. And again, great presentation and really valuable, adding a lot of information where none existed before this. So thank you so much for doing that. I think just one thing that I'd like to highlight is that besides the cross-cutting technologies that you mentioned, green hydrogen and CCUS, we're also looking at industry decarbonization, which takes a much more sectoral and even often plant-specific approach. So that's also a big challenge to scaling up of some of these technologies, because often they're very customized in nature and have to be suited to the individual requirements of each industry and each plant. And so I think that is something that also deserves to be highlighted a little bit, which poses a big challenge for not only identifying opportunities, but also replicating and scaling them up. So just wanted to point that out. Thank you.
Thank you, Survi. Thank you, Abhishek, to both of you. Very helpful feedback. We are curious to hear more about the examples which you mentioned earlier. I think that will also provide essential inputs. I saw my colleague from the GCF also turned on his video, Marta. If there are any comments, feedback you also wanted to make, the floor is yours.
Hi, everybody, and thank you for this report. Very valuable, as others have indeed said. I don't particularly have a lot to add to this. I would be interested. I mean, the report makes mentioning of reasons why funds haven't been deployed at scale yet, and one of the reasons is a shortage of bankable projects as a barrier, and the other is, I guess, risk. I think it would be helpful for all of us to analyze the shortage of bankable projects out there, and how we can all position ourselves going for the future. And this also on a per value chain basis. So I look at entire value chain when I look at kind of both industries, all industries. Sorry, I see you looking. Can you hear me or not?
Yeah, we hear you well, Marta.
Okay, that's great. So I'm very interested on each particular value chain, look at what the opportunities are for each EMDE as well. I mean, if you think about steel, for instance, I mean, 60% of steel is manufactured in China. So, that takes manufacturing out. But what does this mean for the future? If we all think that hydrogen is a way for HDRI is the way forward, right? So we then need to look at where do we source hydrogen. Does it then make sense to put a manufacturing plant next to where that hydrogen is generated or produced? And what countries are therefore in scope? So I think we need to be forward-looking in terms of this project. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is also very helpful. I took note of these both, or all these three interventions from the World Bank and GCF, which actually represent the two main organizations from the donor community or financing side participating in this session. Now we have quite a high representation of the Climate Club members today: Australia, Chile, Spain, Germany, the Netherlands, Indonesia, Korea, Turkey, Thailand, and the United States. And I'd like also to turn to the members to have a discussion around also the report. At the end, this is a Climate Club report, so members' views are very important for us to collect. And I'd like to open the floor for any comments, questions from the Climate Club members as well. I see at the moment no hand being raised, but maybe I can ask also a simpler question that we share also on the screen for the members to elaborate on. The amount of financing and technical assistance that went into the industry decarbonization projects in emerging economies over the past 2 decades, according to the OECD database, is $1 billion. That's the public finance. The private capital that's mobilized is another $1 billion. So that makes 2. And the total amount of investments that's needed for industry decarbonization is significantly higher. So there's a huge gap. We are very curious to know what type of action, what type of next steps would be needed in order to be able to close this gap. And from the different countries who are present here, both beneficiary country or maybe a country that is providing part of bilateral programs, it's very important for us to hear your views on this, how this gap could be closed in terms of assistance. If there are views, comments on this, very happy to hear. Okay, so this is perhaps an area which we probably should be focusing more also on the report in terms of recommendations, and maybe on the 3rd of July meeting we could discuss this further. Another question for also discussion, and this is more a strategic question from the Climate Club perspective as one of its main functions for exchange on dialogue. What is the role you see for Climate Club and the members to create that dialogue platform, exchange function, to be able to increase the availability of assistance? The report provided some findings, so it shows the gap, it shows where more focus is needed in the industry decarbonization space, but what can the Climate Club could offer to close that gap? Maybe also to think from a this club perspective that we are members of, where we are also the secretariat. Any views on that also would be very helpful. I turn again to the member countries who are participating to this discussion today. Maybe our co-chairs may want to break the ice on these 2 questions. I can turn to my colleagues from Germany and Chile. I see Sebastian is still online, and also Felipe from Germany is online. So any comments, any questions on these are very helpful. So Felipe, Sebastian, if you have any views, please feel free to raise your hand and share. Some of them you already elaborated in the opening remarks, but maybe there's more. Okay, so that's, I think, something also to collectively think more on as the interim secretariat and as the co-chairs, how to advance on this discussion. And maybe again at the 3rd of July meeting, members will have more to comment on these parts. There is one other question which I'd like to take you through. And I want to understand from the Climate Club Interim Secretariat perspective the value of this work. A significant amount of data has been collected from all different types of sources. As my colleague Cecile mentioned, the methodologies to report and collect this data from all different sources of the donor community is not really present. Data is scattered, the way it's reported is different, but the conclusions are essential for international cooperation and for creating, let's say, partnerships for advancing on industry decarbonization. Do you see this work from the Climate Club continuing in the coming years, sort of a monitoring type of activity on this type of assistance at the sector, at the country, at the technology level that can, every year show the progress for assistance? Is that something valuable from the member perspective where Climate Club can fulfill and sort of a knowledge gap, let's say? Are there any views from members on this? Is this something useful? We've heard some positive and some inputs on this in the first of body members meeting, but just wanted to also ask anyone else if there is any comment, thoughts on that. Okay, it's another round of silence, but that's absolutely fine. So thank you again, and that's I think a feedback that we will need to think and discuss more on these topics together with you. And now there is also still a number of non-government organizations represented at this meeting. I see my colleagues from the MAF, the Mitigation Action Facility, the LEAD-IT, as well as also from the IEA side of the Climate Club Interim Secretariat. And I'd also like to turn to them, and especially LEAD-IT has been extremely helpful, as well as MAF, in the previous discussions and review of these results findings. And if there are any comments, feedback to the findings of the report from their side, also very curious to hear. Of course, also to the UNIDO team, who is largely participating here as the Secretariat of the Global Matchmaking Platform. I see Nadia here from LEAD-IT today, also my colleagues Fiona from UNIDO, and also I saw my colleagues from MAF earlier. So any comments, suggestions are very welcomed. Okay. No, that's good, and I think we'll follow up on some of these in the finalization of the report with some of the colleagues. Now, in that case, I saw Felix Rees from GIZ raising hand. Please. Felix, over to you.
Yes, I just thought if we have enough time to discuss, I just might ask a question and on the report. And first of all, thanks for putting all the data together, analyzing and presenting. It's really great work. I was wondering how the investments of the companies themselves come into the picture. For example, I think our view is pretty much focused on the ODA funding, on how much private finance we can mobilize, on funds channeled through institutional investors, which is already private sector, and the philanthropies. But if I think about like a major steel company, they have their own ways of raising capital. They have, if they want to invest in a new plant, they will, I mean, they have some own funds, they have banks, and I'm just wondering if, like what is the size of the investments they are actually planning, and that it, can we link it a bit better to the institutional funding and the public funding, because it's kind of not represented in the ODA figures, and not in the institutional investors like funds, which are kind of like a third party and not so how does it relate to the planned investments of the steel, cement and chemical industries themselves?
Yeah, thank you for the question. And that's a good question, actually, because yes, we know that private sector will provide most of the capital needed directly. Indeed, the focus on the companies and on the private finance from company is not something that is included in this scope as the first mapping. So I mean, we do not focus on specific companies and how we invest. We know that it's another indeed scope. I mean, as you said at the beginning, so we have targeted a few scope, but this is not in the mapping. However, what you mentioned about the investment, it's true that there will be an indirect link with institutional investor. For instance, when we try to see to what extent the institutional investor pension fund have investing in some manufacturing company, and so meaning that the next step would be, for instance, to look at for these manufacturing companies. I mean, related to the institutional investor link that we have found, to what extent they develop decarbonisation plan, to what extent they have started investing in, but that would be indeed, I would say, a different, the next scope actually, and again, that would, I think I can anticipate that we would face the same data aspect, because it would be about looking at company by company. But yes, what could be also useful in that case is to look more specifically at the projects happening. But yeah, that would need a very company by company focus.
Thank you, Cecile. I see. Felipe, please, Germany.
Hi, thank you very much, Dea and Cecile. It was definitely a pleasure to see the progress that you've made with the mapping. So far, the information that you presented is quite stark and presents sort of a bleak picture in many senses. We're very interested to see this sort of moving forward in the next couple of years. How I think the mapping is a picture in time, right? And what we want to see is how it progresses in the next decade. So for us, it's really important that we can keep the momentum and the interest and the research going on the mapping of financial flows around industrial decarbonization. ODA, of course, is an important lever for the private sector investments that are needed. If it could be complemented with other information, as Felix suggested, of course, this would be very interesting. The link from ODA investments and how they're actually mobilizing the private sector investments in steel and cement would definitely be an added value of the Climate Club. And this mapping is really going to feed into the work of the global matchmaking platform, the work that UNIDO is doing, and hopefully we can, not only through the mapping, but through module 2, where we dive deeper into the financial instruments and how they are moving forward and unlocking private sector investments, then these two can really help us to move decarbonization forward in the next couple of years. So the mapping of technical assistance, what is working on the ground through module 2, and then where it all becomes a reality in the global matchmaking platform, trying to take this technical and financial assistance and really getting it to the countries so that they can, develop the enabling conditions, the policy frameworks, the financial incentives, so that the private sector can sort of securely and with the clear political and economic signals start investing in industrial decarbonization is very important for us. So thank you very much to Cecile, Dea, your teams for this work, for UNIDO for taking all this knowledge into account when you're moving forward with the global matchmaking platform. So we're very happy to see this progress made so far, and would love to see this also moving forward and hopefully complemented with additional information. Thank you.
Thank you, Felipe. Cecile, is there points you want to reflect on?
No, just to acknowledge that, I think it's really much also related to the previous question where we could think about further type of scope beyond ODA, so that's well noted. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Felipe, and also making the link to the global matchmaking platform. I'd like to give the floor to my colleague, Ricardo, from UNIDO, but just before that I saw Per Gebauer from the Mitigation Action Facility raising his hand. Over to you, Per, please.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks for this very interesting presentation. Can you still see me and hear me? Okay.
Yeah, we see you.
Thank you. I was just wondering if it's feasible from the data that you gathered to get also a more granular kind of picture in terms of the regional gaps and the different needs. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the question. So in terms of granular data, as you mentioned, the most granular data we had was the one from ODA, indeed public. And so in terms of gaps, I think that relates to indeed the findings about the recipient countries, because what we've seen is that there are very little countries that have received support for industry decarbonization. So it's in terms of number of countries, but also in terms of type of country, because we do not see, for instance, the major manufacturing countries in this list. So I think that the mapping at least shows that yes, there is a gap in terms of, as you said, regional gap. If you take the most important region in terms of manufacturing industries, we could fairly say that based on what we have seen so far from the ODA perspective, at least, that they have not targeted the biggest producing countries. So that's something that can be seen indeed. So yes, the data, at least from the ODA perspective and also from the private finance mobilized, would allow to look at specifically which countries have received, and so try to draw trends on the region which are most likely to have received this assistance, and which could be compared in return to the current picture about manufacturing and emissions on these sectors.
Thank you.
Thank you, Per, and thank you, Cecile, also for the detailed response. Are there any more questions, comments, anything anyone else to add? Otherwise, I'd like to give the floor to my colleague, Ricardo from UNIDO. As you know, UNIDO is the secretariat of the Global Matchmaking Platform of Climate Club, and there is very interesting update from the UNIDO side on the progress and where we stand now and the next steps. Ricardo, over to you, please.
Thank you, Degar. Good morning, everyone. And let me just start with a comment on your report, on the report you presented, and to acknowledge how difficult could be. Also, we realized, since UNIDO works primarily on industrial development, and we actually look for financial opportunities on industrial development, we also acknowledge very much the difficulties in what you experience in getting data specific for implementation of actions in the decarbonization of industry. So it may be something that will change in future, because we have specific in the past we had very specific let's say sources of financial resources for energy efficiency, for instance. Maybe in future we will have also dedicated for industrial decarbonization. So, and maybe the Climate Lab action will also facilitate let's say a dialogue on that, and maybe will help shaping let's say a new way of directing the financial resources towards the industrial decarbonization. And my name is Riccardo Savigliano, and I will present you the status of the global matchmaking platform. Next slide, please. Which is actually as correctly and before presented, is an initiative under the Climate Lab, Pillar 3, which is looking into finding ways to quickly mobilize resources, in particular for cement and steel, in countries with emerging and developing economies. So how that matchmaking platform works, it starts from the requests from countries and then tries to get the match with international existing financial assistance, but it aims also at leveraging new financing and with the purpose of facilitate technology transfer. So we have the global matchmaking platform secretariat. We started working and conceptualizing and testing, and then we will see later on where we are on that. We believe that the intervention of the global matchmaking platform will go into two main areas of support. One, enhancing and supporting the enabling environment, so more related to policy support and support to governments to set up, let's say, frameworks, looking into targets, helping with analysis, standards, MRV systems, and so on and so forth. And of course, as mentioned before, the largest effort that we will put in the next few months, we believe will go into the NDC updates, which is something that, of course, countries will work on in, we all know, in the months to come. The other chapter of the other area of support will be to facilitating investments and technology deployment. So that will go into need assessments, support, even to companies to provide solutions, providing also pre-feasibility studies, investment proposals, de-risking instruments, and so on and so forth. So these are the two main areas that we believe the global matchmaking platform will support country with, and we are basically setting up our structure to serve on those two areas. Next slide, please. For the purpose of primarily of the audience of today, and we would like to highlight among the services that we have in mind, the potential impact that could be also of relevance of IFIs and financial institutions. The global matchmaking platform aims at making rigorous screens of the asks, of the requests, and that we believe will have a very strong impact on the identification of solid pipelines. And in long term, even medium term, we hope that will make a higher efficiency in mobilizing funds and to direct funds into the industrial decarbonization. The other service is it will be in trying to coordinate sectorial focused interventions. So bringing together partners and key stakeholders and also helping shaping those new partnerships, and that will make will impact on the scale up of the interventions and the collaboration at the higher level. So finally, and probably is the one of the most important elements of the platform, is that the GMP will identify political directions and will actually get also political ambitions from governments, and that will help everyone to get longer term planning, which is also from the point of view of donors something that could be of great interest. Last slide, and then I will conclude with that, is a graph where you can see from where we started. We started actually in October with some idea, the launch in December last year, and now we are in between, let's say, the starting and the launching that will be done at the COP29. And let me point out the month where we are. So in June, we identified pilot countries where we will get we are engaging with them. So the idea is to get the support also from them in terms of testing the mechanisms, and of course from us already start arranging ourselves in order to provide them with the needed support. Argentina, Brazil, Indonesia, Kenya, and Morocco are the countries that have been selected. So the pilot will start from mid of July, will go until, again, before just the COP, and then in the pilot phase, we will refine the different services that the GMP will offer. Let me just say that during this period, the work with the IFIs is essential, because the moment we talk about making matches, and as I said before, the match will be from the demands, but also from and that those demands will come from governments, and the match will be done with existing or potential sources of funds. So the dialogue with IFIs is extremely interesting. So thank you for also to the interim secretariat for having engaged with us, and then having, let's say, involved us in some of the dialogues with potential donors. And the idea would be also to get a session while the pilot phase is giving us a bit more information. So maybe in September the idea would be to launch, to ask for a more more practical, let's say, meeting with potential donors and financial institutions to see whether what we have in mind may actually work and be launched at COP29. So with that, I conclude here. Degar, I hope I didn't take too much time, but I would be very happy to answer questions.
Thank you so much, Ricardo. This was super informative. There's already one question to you from the World Bank. It's in the chat. I'll read it out loud. Are South Asian countries eligible to access GMP? You'd like to respond to that, Ricardo?
Yes, of course, South Asian countries will be, I mean, that's going to be a global initiative. So that would be, it's part of the Climate Club initiative with a global perspective. I think, I mean, there will not be any issue to extend it to the South Asian countries. Maybe we can take it separately. I don't know whether there is any countries specifically in mind, but the pilot phase is designed with countries representing the different geographical regions. As I said, also Indonesia is there. So yeah, in future, in any case, the platform is going to be with a global nature. Is an initiative of the Climate Club. So I think, I mean, will be priority given to the Climate Club members. But for instance, you have seen Brazil, for instance, is there. Is not a Climate Club member, but so that's also a sign of a global, let's say, approach. I hope I answered. And maybe Felipe, you can also add to that but in case I said anything
Thank you.
that you
Thank
can
you,
build
Ricardo.
on, back to you.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe before I hand over to Felipe, in case he has more to add, there is one more question that is from Australia. Thanks for the update on the pilot. Could you explain more what your plans are for the boardroom meeting with donors in September or October? Ricardo, if you'd like to answer this.
It is actually something that we are going to discuss and shape it. Is going to be a proposal that we may put forward in the next few weeks. In particular, there will be it was one of the points that we would like to propose to the Interim Secretariat for the 3rd of July. We are discussing with also with the Interim Secretariat on how to shape it. So if there is a need, of course, we will make it. The idea is to go and present the technicalities of the matchmaking platform, and to see whether that is actually something that could be, let's say, taking into consideration the donors' needs. So the platform is being built on the needs particular of countries, and to allow a perfect match, we also have to ensure that the need from donors and IFIs would be also integrated. So we were thinking that on that to work on the technicalities of that match from the financial point of view and the donors' point of view. So still, again, it's something we are building based on the information we are getting, and for sure, this meeting of today is essential for us to understand what is needed actually.
Thank you,
I hope I answered. Back to you.
Thank you, Ricardo. I was just taking note of your response. Felipe, would you like to add anything? I see you turned on your video. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Dea and Ricardo. Thank you, Ricardo, and your team for the update that you've provided today. We're very happy to see the progress that has been made on the global matchmaking platform so far. We're very happy to see that the sort of initial procedures for receiving requests from countries has been advanced, that we are already reaching out to the donor community to see how they can offer their technical and financial assistance through the matchmaking platform, that you have already started contacting countries that would be interested to receive requests through the GMP, that can start piloting these procedures that you've put together, and hopefully we can find suitable matches for the requests for support. It's as Ricardo was saying, the GMP, the Global Matchmaking Platform, is not only open to Climate Club members, but to all emerging markets and developing economies. And we want to sort of start with a couple of the members from the Climate Club, since we have sort of already open communication lines with them, and they have also through these kind of meetings sort of demonstrated their interest in being part of the piloting process. And as Ricardo said, by COP29, we expect to have sort of the full launch and operationalization of the global matchmaking platform. Yeah, I see a couple of colleagues that have their hands up. Pea, I think they had their hand up from before Ricardo was speaking, so not to take too long, back to you, Dea.
Thank you, Felipe. I'd like to turn to my colleague from the World Bank, as there's one question. And then I'll read out the question from Turkey.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the clarification that at some point in time, South Asian countries will also be eligible. So what would be required for these countries to access this platform, which looks very promising? I think it will be very important for the countries to know, and I'm assuming that the Climate Club Secretariat would be doing some kind of sensitization with the government officials, because they need to process the request, if I understand it correctly. So that was my first point. Not necessarily how to respond, but just reflecting on how other funds have been mobilized in the country, like GCF and GEF. Second is that what is the timeline that we will be looking for, and what would the ticket size for each project? I think it will be also equally helpful to know for the governments as well as for the people who will be utilizing these funds. And the last one is that I heard that you would need IFIs like World Bank and others to participate in it. So what is expected out of us? At what point in time should we come to you? Or, should we be involved right away with Climate Club to post you on what we are doing? At what point in time should we be reaching out? Where would be the starting point? Should it be the government? Should it be the IFIs? How it will all pan out? Probably not now if you don't have all the details, but at some point in time it will be useful for us so that we can take advantage of this platform which is available. Thank you.
Thank you, Subi. And maybe Ricardo, before I hand over to you, there's the question from Turkey also, and maybe you can respond to them collectively. The question goes, is the GMP providing the mechanism for the funding of new investments or modernization needs? Will there be a platform or online database for the status of the GMP works? So, Ricardo, if you could briefly respond to these few questions, that would be great. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Dagger. And so I will start from the first question. And yeah, definitely. As I said, I mean, we expect different requests from countries depending on their needs. It will be on the kind of policy and let's say the ecosystem, no, the industrial ecosystem in general. And then, of course, that will have a type of ticketing size we expect, while we also expect, let's say, investments, kind of request for support, which will probably have a different ticketing size. The matchmaking platform is going to be the one directing the request, I mean, screening the request and directing the request on the existing initiatives. However, I mean, at the beginning, it will be primarily on the existing initiatives. However, as I said, we don't limit ourselves only to the existing. Maybe we find donors that would be interested in shaping maybe future programs together. As a matter of fact, we are already in discussion with some of the financial institutions which are helping and giving us some hints on that regard. And of course, the sooner the better. The sooner we engage, the better will be for everyone. So you can reach out to us through the interim secretariat or directly to UNIDO, and then we can think about what could be feasible in terms of service that the GMP could provide to you in future. Again, we are still flexible. We expect at the beginning to concentrate primarily on the primarily in terms of the number of tickets we are going to get on the policy framework and on the NDC updates. That is something that we are structuring, because we hear from governments that is something urgently needed on their side. But of course, we also have, you mentioned before, investments on the green hydrogen and the size that could also imply. We do also have countries expressing their interest in looking into that sector. So bottom line, the earlier we engage with the IFIs, the better is in terms of for us to shape a proper service. And that, I think I covered the first question, right? Or if there is anything else, you can kindly let me know. And from the request from Turkey, innovation will be definitely part of the service that the global matchmaking platform will provide, and in particular when it comes to let's say identifying the before I presented the two areas of intervention on technology deployment. If there is a need for that to work on in countries on modernization, that would be the area. I guess modernization, the question was on technology, right? More than policy. Yeah. And the way probably, there was a question on the way the global matchmaking will work. We are still trying to think about maybe launching calls, and then those calls we believe that could be maybe thematic, and then maybe pre-arranged with some donors maybe, or could be like the engagement could be through, let's say, requests sent by email. We will definitely have sessions for governments and to explain them how that mechanism will work. We are working on the guidance framework that will be actually the one describing how governments will need to interact with the GMP. Usually we expect requests, and we will probably prioritize requests coming from different entities at national level, not only at the governmental level but also at the regional and local level. Some of the initiatives will have also a very strong impact on municipalities, for instance. So we expect that those requests for support will come already with a kind of blended as a blended initiative from governments at different levels. Degar, do you think, I can give it back to you?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, thank you for the comprehensive responses. I think these were very helpful, and we'll provide further updates on the GMP as the progress is being made to the members. But obviously, we also have the dialogue running with the different donors. So I think we came to the end of this meeting. So just before I close, this was the first session. So there will be another session in the afternoon, Central European summertime. Again, members will be attending, as well as the different actors of the donor community and investors. So as for next steps, the members are very welcome to comment on the report until 3rd of July. The planned publication is September at the second body of members meeting, and all the findings of this work. So where we stand with in terms of assistance, what's on the offer, will provide inputs to the global matchmaking platform. There were some comments on the how to create commercial investments, so mobilizing private capital, creating demonstration effect, lighthouse effect, and understanding how assistance can help de-risking entire value chain of the industry decarbonization. Those issues are covered by the second module of Pillar 3. There will be an update on that in September. So right after the summer, we'll be sharing the progress and findings from that work as well. And as we've also heard, the full launch of the GMP with requests coming from countries is planned for the COP29. And finally, there are still a number of areas which the Climate Club Interim Secretariat and the members will be elaborating on. So that's planned for the 3rd of July, senior official dialogue, and we very much look forward to that. And I thank very much my colleagues, Cecile and Amidia from the OECD side for this report and the analysis, and from the Climate Club Interim Secretariat side, Akiko, Michael, and Yosha, who have organized this meeting, and the colleagues from UNIDO side, Ricardo and Barbara for the GMP Secretariat, and everyone else for their contributions. We look forward to seeing other colleagues and stakeholders in a few hours from today. Thank you, and have a good rest of your day, evening.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.